do.
I do.
I really want to know.
Eventually, we're going to know. Eventually
maybe
we will know.
I don't know. People that know that they know already. So
they do. That's true. They do know. Well, good morning and welcome to the latest episode of the Project Failure Files, the series for anyone who manages people, projects, or processes, or lots of other things for a living. I am Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And I'm Christian Buckley, founder of Collab Talk. And welcome to another episode where Sharon and I explore leadership and management topics from the perspective of what not to do.
Speaking of leadership and management topics, today we are going to talk about a mindset that sounds productive, but it's actually kind of destructive. Squeezing every last drop out of your team. So here's the deal. Driving results is important, but ultimately if output becomes the only metric that matters, I don't know if you've noticed, but people eventually just kind of break.
Yeah, this is the, we can rest later. We can rest after we launch, after we go live. And that's fine when it happens once in a while. When it's part of the culture, there's always another launch. There's always another project. There's always another fire. And, everything gets postponed. The development, training, personal time, vacations, everything gets postponed indefinitely when you live in that kind of fire sale environment.
Yeah, exactly. And ultimately, like, high performing teams are not machines. Oh my God, I cannot tell you how many times I have this conversation. Anyways, if all you care about is delivery and you're not investing in growth, skill building, well-being, you don't end up getting excellence. You just get burnout and turnover because ultimately you are turning your employees into machines and you're asking them to just go, 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 go. You're not focusing on really what they're good at and getting that out of them.
I'm sorry, Sharon, but if I just tell my team that we believe in work-life balance, if I just throw that in when I'm talking to them, that usually paves things over, makes everybody happy for a short while. So
yeah, sure it does.
No, I mean, here's the irony of this: is the more that you demand short-term for productivity, the more you undermine that long-term performance. When you're breaking the model, when you're breaking the structure, what happens is when you're demanding that, it's almost like you're micromanaging how they're delivering their work. So people then stop experimenting, they stop learning, and they stop caring for it. And it's just like, what is my list of the 50 things I need to do each day? Give it to me. And then they go home and they're looking for other jobs.
Yeah. I mean, and another thing is leaders really need to see beyond job titles. I think ultimately what ends up happening is that, because somebody is in a role currently, that's like all that they're capable of doing or ever doing. But truthfully, like, you might have a developer who has amazing facilitation skills, or you might have an analyst that has really good leadership potential. If all you ever ask is for them to do the things that they're doing and you're just focused on their day-to-day output, you never realize maybe some of their hidden strengths.
I wrote an article, it's out on LinkedIn somewhere years ago, but the myth of the well-rounded employee.
Mm-hmm.
That old concept that everybody has to be good at everything, and that's how to move up in these employees. And there are those people. They're freaks of nature. They're good at everything that they touch. We all know those people like Sharon that are like that. Makes you sick. That are good at everything. Anyway. No, but this idea that most people, it's actually why I'm sorry, I'm soapboxing a little bit. I love that book, The First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham, where they talk about, identifying that we all have strengths, we all have passions, and the highest performing teams are, and it's a little bit off topic, but are when you can build a team around the strengths of those individuals. And it's almost like that island of misfit toys, but they all have their super strength, their strongest traits all work together to do those things. I want to structure teams that have people that are high performers in these categories, and it's lopsided, but then together they just crush it. I've led those have been in the best teams that I've managed in my career.
And just to clarify, Christian, I am not good at everything I do. I just do things I'm good at, which makes me appear to be good at things.
That is a secret thing. Like, we should have a session on that. Only do things you're good at. Let me write that down.
I learned many, many years ago, and this is actually something I worked with a coach on, is like, pick the things you're good at and focus on the things you're good at. It's not, I still have to pay attention to my faults, but ultimately, things I'm not good at, walking down a flight of stairs without falling down them. I'm just not talented at that.
I know, right? This lie that's out there of walking and chewing gum. I mean, come on. Let's be reasonable here. No, but that's why, I mean, absolutely love you folks. If you've not read this book, First Break All the Rules, that's a big part of that, managing to people's strengths. But the other part of this, though, it's like it's training it's not just a checkbox. Helping people develop their skills, their technical abilities, their soft skills as well, to train people on and guide them around collaboration. I love the whole thing with organizations that have things documented of, here's how, we use SharePoint for our intranet. We use Microsoft Teams for our collaboration. Here's how we use these tools. Here's how we work. That helps people better scale within those roles. And then, of course, here's how we make decisions. Here's how we manage projects. Give people the systems around which they can operate, and operate within those systems, within those methodologies, if you will.
Yeah. And, ultimately, it's not just about telling people to do things and rewarding, the job that they're doing. It's also recognizing the things that make them successful kind of overall. And part of that is, and I always like to bring up the cultural elements here, right? But, we think about behavior. And if you only reward them showing up to work and doing their task, that's really what you're going to get. If instead you also start rewarding taking ownership or being creative or growing or, being innovative or moving forward, all of a sudden you get a culture with people who are doing that, because that's what you're doing to, keep those people happy.
One of my favorite things, Sharon, is and I've done this a couple times, teams that I've managed, but is rewarding when they recognize each other. Mm-hmm. And so if you put an award out there, and I've done this where there was no money involved, I've done it where there's money involved out there, but you're not picking, the team is picking. And it can't be themselves. Like, I did a great job on this project, Sharon, therefore I think I get the award this month. No, they're making that selection. They're in control of that. I think that's it. That's great. Yeah. I think ownership, though, is the big one here. So when people feel trusted, they feel enabled to go and innovate, to try things, to fail sometimes, but it's not just about execution. Performance, when they can innovate, when they can try things, performance goes up, not down. AI is a great example of that. If people are given like the leeway to go and find ways to automate, to find ways of using the new technology, within their roles, you're going to see cool things happen, and people get pretty excited by that. So other people that are like, I have no interest in doing that. That's fine. You can find other ways.
Yeah. And just to be fair, driving results and developing people do not have to be opposing goals. Yeah. In fact, in my opinion and what I've experienced, sustainable results 100% depend on developing your people. If you ignore that, you may have better metrics today, but you'll pay for it later.
Right. Completely agree. As always, should be a great discussion, as with every episode that we have here. I enjoy having these conversations, reminiscing down sometimes painful topics, reliving experiences that we want to keep shuttered, of what not to do, what we've seen or experienced, or maybe have done ourselves there. But folks, if you are not yet following us out on YouTube, go out and subscribe. Go to YouTube and search for some Project Failure Files. We've got our newsletter that's out on Substack. So multiple ways to find us and get involved. We'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love to hear your stories. We actually we have plans to do interviews with people and learn about where projects have failed and what you learned, how you reversed that failure. We would love to interview you. So it could be 5 minute, could be a 55 minute, depending on how interesting it is. But we'd love to hear from you either way.
Yeah. So let's get started with some definitions.
All right. When I think of this, I think of this leadership mindset that equates maximum output with maximum performance, regardless of what we're actually doing to our people, what that actually means. Squeezing every last drop sounds like high performance, but it's really extraction. You're sucking the soul out of humans. When maximum output becomes the only metric that matters, you're not going to build a team. You are consuming, you're draining them.
Yeah, I remember when I first started, when Agile methodology really became, I'm not going to say it was new, but it was definitely like coming full force into software development, because I grew up in software development shops. And when Agile kind of really became, really trendy, really hot, we started really studying some of the Agile manifesto and the Agile methodology. And one of the things that they speak to pretty heavily in the methodology is around the idea of effort. And if you're doing it right, you should be essentially monitoring your team's natural state and basically saying, what can you handle on your own that you're willing to commit to? And what does that natural pace look like for you? And then you essentially make your plans based around that, as opposed to pushing them as hard as they can go and calling that your average effort, right? And I think about this in terms of like, if you're going to run a marathon, there's a difference between running in a sprint and running a marathon, right? You run a sprint and you run as fast as you possibly can, and then you're done. You run a marathon and you're going to find a steady pace that is healthy and realistic that you can do for a very, very, very long time. And I think what ends up happening in the leadership and the management space is we say, how fast can somebody run in a sprint? And then we continue to ask them to do that for the marathon. And then we're surprised when they get sick, they collapse, they fall down, they get burned out, or they just leave. Right. Because they can't run that much anymore.
Yeah. It's productivity without sustainability.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love that, that it sounds admirable. This we're a high performing team and we push hard. It's like, yeah, everybody, we're all trying to do that and deliver. I know I've shared this story in past episodes. I'll say it again, but my first tech job, a little company outside of Sacramento and Rockland, California, it was back in 91, 92. So the first tech company that I worked for. And remember on Friday, like everybody's gone. It's like after 6. And I was we had kind of 2 offices that had firewall warehouses back behind. And I was over on the other side. I was in there alone in the room, music going, but I'm sitting and working on some stuff at like 6:15 or something on a Friday. And the CEO walked over from the other side and was like locking up the doors. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm working on this thing. And he's to go live on, Monday. We said we're going to do this. And he's like, we had a short conversation. The net of it was, he says, look, we've either, underestimated the timeline here. We got it wrong in the calculation, or we need additional help here, other tasks that you're doing. Like, you should not be, I wasn't getting paid overtime. There's nothing approved. I was just pride in work. I enjoyed what I was working on, but wanted to get that done and be ready and stay on schedule on Monday. And then that's when he learned, he's like, I don't want you to be working for extra hours. He actually told me that, and he's like, look, you report your actual hours for this. You shouldn't be doing this, but I want you to let's look at what else is on your load of your tasks, and let's remove stuff so you can focus on these things that have higher impact. And it was a great discussion where he said a little bit more about It's like, go home. At the time, wife and my oldest, my little baby girl at home. It's like, go home. It's Friday, and stop working. And it was a great discussion that really kind of stuck with me, especially early in my career, and then going and working for some startups that did not feel the same way about abusing people's calendars. But there are trade-offs. I was paid a lot more for those other companies, so I went into it knowingly, but that again, and I got burned out, and I had to take a break after that company.
So let's talk about that. What are some of the impacts, like burnout, that you see if people are treated more like, machines? I hate to use that, but I mean, they're treated more like machines than they are like people. What ends up happening?
I mean, work becomes transactional. People stop talking about their career moves, what they want to do next and the types of projects. They get more into like survival mode around that. They get those tasks done. They stop asking, how can I improve this? What's the right thing for the company? Those kinds of things that when you have, it's not like you should have leisurely time. It's good to have a healthy amount of activity, and that we're already feeling busy. That's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to have time for creativity. Mm-hmm. You have to have time to get insights out of this. We did it this way. Was that the right way? How can we make that better? Going back to a discussion we had, we had several times around the postmortem, the review of closed projects, to learn from that. If you never take time to learn because you're constantly rushing to deliver on this, you never learn as an organization. So work becomes transactional, skills stagnate. The biggest problem within the organization is that, a non-learning organization is that they're usually very low trust organizations, and people will jump ship at the first slightly better opportunity.
Yeah. I think that's really true. I also think that ultimately you start seeing teams at a culture level basically just doing the things to mark the tasks off the list. You don't see very much innovation. Everybody's working
quality
hard.
Of those tasks. Yeah.
Everybody's working hard, but nothing's really getting done well.
Yeah. It's hard to also adapt to changes. So any disruption to the timeline, to the technology used, anything that changes in the customer relationships, all those things can be very difficult to adjust to within those projects.
Yeah. And just culturally, I just think, there's all kinds of like toxic things that kind of come in. You not only do you get busy, but then you kind of can develop this hero culture where ultimately everybody's just kind of showing up and doing their job. And so to be noticed, you have to run faster, and you have to be sparklier, and you have to be shinier. And so ultimately it's like, I now have to go beyond the speed of light for anybody to notice that I'm doing anything, because everybody is expected to do this crazy amount of work. And so this hero culture kind of evolves because people are like, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me, so that I can get, something in my career that I wouldn't get otherwise. And so it just kind of goes down the wrong path, I think, culturally.
Yeah, I think when leaders demand constant performance without investing in growth, then ownership declines. People stop thinking about, stop thinking like builders. Like I like this. I want my employees to feel like they own what we're doing. Like they're part of that, and they take pride in what we're delivering as a team, as an organization. People stop thinking like that. They start thinking like task doers, like give me my list of things to go and do. And when I'm done, I'm out of here. That's when they become clock watchers. And that's also where momentum, it quietly collapses.
Yeah. And so, I don't know. I was just trying to think of there's so many stories where I've seen people do this, right? I think as I think back across so many different ways that this could have been done, like I said, I grew up in software development, and back in the day, it was just like one software development shop after another was kind of doing the same thing. And I think what ended up happening is they were all kind of vying for all of the high performers, in the area, right? So they were all kind of watching. And what was really funny is we used to joke that, it was kind of like a fire drill, right? You would see people get out of one company, and then like two or three of them would shift to a different company, and they'd go there, and then they would shift to a different company. You see the same people, like we all knew who each other were, right? We just kind of rotated from company to company to company. But what would happen is they would watch you, and then they would bring you in, and you would see them literally hire people and burn them out.
Yeah.
And then you would see those same people taking a month, 2 months, 3 months off and working jobs at a grocery store or a restaurant or something like that, just to kind of get their sanity back. Because ultimately they would come in, they would get burned out, and then they wouldn't stick around. And so I just remember in software development, there being this kind of really big season of people coming in, making a bunch of money, working real hard, and then going and doing something different for a couple of months until they were recruited again to do the same thing. And I always thought, how nice would it be if things were a little bit more steady and regular? And I think things have changed, but I just remember that kind of being the way that things were.
I've seen the same things, and part of it too is that if you're thinking about those short-term productivity wins, and yet you're losing your long-term, the knowledge, the wisdom, that experience. And so look, there are people there that love that kind of environment, and they seek after that kind of thing. And I'll admit that, I mean, that was me for a long time. And I've seen really high performing teams. They're hitting their numbers, they're delivering quarter after quarter. They still lose their strongest people. That, just gets to a certain level in the career. Like we've talked about this. Like our careers have changed a lot. When I was in my mid-20s, I loved that, looking for the new opportunity, looking for the growth around that. And to where now I would love to, as a seasoned professional, I'm not chasing after those things. I have more, not that they don't have the younger folks that are driving, that going after those kinds of high profile, all the time, high energy environments. There's nothing wrong with that. It takes all types for that. What I'm looking for is more of steady and consistent, and looking for that balance. I don't need the ego stroking of those other roles. I realize that there's trade-offs. There's higher paying functions like over and doing that. That's why sometimes they're paid so well. And also on the other side, why so many of them are so unhappy. So, and finding that balance and being honest with yourself about what type of environment you want to be in. Again, no judgment call of people that like that kind of environment, but typically it's just not sustainable.
Yeah, no, I see exactly the same thing. So what are some things that we can do to kind of get past that and overcome those issues?
Yeah, I mean, I see the first thing is being very careful with seeing beyond job titles. I've talked about this too, where I was frustrated, joined a big company, big enterprise, and I had spent years working with clients in one industry, and I came in and I kept saying, it's like, hey, I could work with this client. I had that experience, and I was told several times, like, that's not your job. And I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. That was my job for 5 years before joining this company. I have the experience there. I know the space. And so I got out of line, Sharon. I went and helped that other team and worked with those clients without permission from my manager.
dare you?
And I got yelled at for helping. I got praise from the other team, lots of
course.
kudos, lots of thank yous, because nobody else would help them. And so I again, this is me, but I like doing the right thing for the right reasons, regardless of what that myopic viewed manager was saying to me. But that's me, you know. But that's what I would say. I would like look beyond that, and that's why you have, as part of assigning project managers, for example, of talking to them about projects, not just saying, hey, you're next in the rotation, but saying, okay, this new client, here's the scope of the project. You're next up. Is this the best fit, or is this better? Having that kind of discussion so that they have a voice in that people have in the types of projects and things that they're looking to do, or somebody that feels like they've been kind of typecast into these projects or working with this internal customer, giving them an opportunity to go expand and work with other groups. That should be a regular part of your discussions as a leader, as a manager.
Yeah, no, if you're having people do the exact same thing over and over and over, they're never going to grow. And ultimately, you need to have a framework in the way that you do things that not only matches people up with the right thing, kind of forces them to stretch and innovate a little bit, but also make sure that you are allocating dedicated time for them to learn and try and do new things, so that ultimately they're not stagnant. If they're stagnant because they don't do the learning, that's on them. But if they're stagnant because you're not giving them an opportunity or space for the learning, then it's on you as the manager.
The other thing too is in your one-on-ones. I mean, the wrong way to do your one-on-ones, if it's all about project status. Well, sorry for my language here, but read the damn status report. There's the project status.
Right.
You know, this should be, that one-on-one should be more about, how are you doing? Are you blocked anywhere? How can I help? In what areas? You know, how are you feeling? Like, are you feeling overwhelmed in the work or not? Like, what else is going on? Actually getting to know your people and what drives them, what they're passionate about, and how you, again, this goes back to my favorite book, First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham, and some other author, but Marcus was the guy. Come on. Of utilizing people, leaning in on their strengths. I would want to better understand my people, their backgrounds, not just their role, their title, what they're working on, but say, what else can we do? How else can we help you from a career standpoint, not just this role?
You know, I'm gonna have a soapbox for a moment on this topic, because here's the thing. I feel like, and I understand, you know, I'm a little US centric here, right, to talk about this, but I feel like we in the US have really created a little bit of a problem for ourselves, right?
What?
We have put so many people into roles exactly like what you just talked about, where you must show up at this time, you must leave at this time, I'm going to tell you what to do, and you're only going to do what I tell you to do, and you're not going to do anything that I didn't tell you what to do.
The way that I told you to do it, right?
The way that I told you, that you're not allowed to think for yourself, that here's what happens as a result of that. Not only does that become frustrating, those people do not understand what their actual value is. They have no idea what value they have to offer in the work world. And this is a big struggle that I am seeing in a lot of different places, where you ask somebody what they're worth, what their value is, and they will go, I made this at my last job. That's not your value. That's what you were paid in your last role, which does not necessarily line up with what your value is that you're offering. And I think that in a good culture, you are teaching people how to identify and grow and take advantage of their personal value. And you're not focused on how many hours did you work, but what is it that you're doing? What are you creating? What are you innovating? What value are you providing to the business? And hopefully they will then take that and know what their value is.
Yeah.
All right. Soapbox done.
Right. Completely agree. I know that in the interest of time here too is that we're it's funny as we've been talking about, Sharon and I have been talking about these episodes where the titles, the subject matter is can just come off as very negative, very downward, depressing in some ways, and we're trying to say like this is what not to do, but I want to make sure that we have adequate time. We talk about like what are the best practices to go and do here. So I think we've thoroughly explained the negative side of this. Now let's talk about what are the best practices, Sharon. So what can people do?
Well, definitely you should identify what the actual value of your resources are and work with them to understand what is it that they can do, how can they mature, how can they grow, how can they stretch, what obvious, visible career pathways do they have, help them to understand what their true value is so that they can build on that and they can become really great team members and build a good culture around that.
I think there's so much you could do around helping them shape. They may not have an idea of what they want as far as their own career path and what's possible. Now, obviously, it has to be done within the the confines of here's what we can actually offer and what people need to do. Sometimes the only answer is there's just not a path for you long term here at the company. But while you're here, we have this. This is what we can do, and then be supportive. In fact, it's something you see. A lot more of are these boomerang employees that leave to go and develop skills. For example, they go and they finish a degree or something or other certifications. There's no path. There's no upward mobility in that role. They go leave for a couple of years. They get into a management role and then they come back as a manager in some higher level job. Now, I would love to be able to keep those people and that learning during that time, but sometimes they need to go outside to get that other experience to come back to provide more value later. So to just be realistic, have those conversations about that career path for individuals and what they can actually do, and encourage them to be the most that they can within that role, but then not be afraid to have that conversation of what the world looks like if they leave.
Well, and I think it's really important. So one of the other things that I do, I've worked with the maturity model for M365 for a number of years. And one of the things that I've done multiple workshops on is the employee experience side of things. And a topic that we bring up frequently is a lot of times organizations don't think as much about the onboarding and offboarding aspects, right? And what I mean by that is what you think about a company before you're hired and what you think about a company after you leave. And the best, most mature companies have that in mind. And so they think beyond what is my worker doing today? And they think about what do people think about wanting to come work here so that we're recruiting the best talent possible? What do people think about staying here and wanting to build a career here? And what do people think about if they leave? Are they still willing to potentially come back at a later time with the boomerang employee kind of idea where they've grown and they've maybe potentially found another spot to come back? Are they open to then, potentially referring other people that they know that are good performers to also come back? If you're thinking about all of these things, your goal isn't squeeze every drop out of the people who are coming in. It's instead making sure that you have the absolute best resources and they're really happy to want to be there. They're really happy to tell their friends about it. And if they need to go, they understand that that's just part of how it works, but they're happy to come back if there's an opportunity.
It's, what it is, Sharon, it's you're maximizing the value while they're there. You want to, and so you're not trying to just, squeeze everything out of them. We want to give you the right opportunities so that we get the very best out of our people and we maximize on getting the very best out of our people, in a healthy way.
Exactly.
And so that's systems, that's processes, that's conversations. That's again, if people are happy in their role and they feel like, hey, I'm heard, I'm seen, I've given these growth opportunities, they're willing to work the longer hours when needed. It just shouldn't be every week for years and years.
Yes.
It should be the exception, not the practice. But the quality of the work goes up when you have that kind of balance.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think if your culture believes in that and your leadership supports it, you're going to get way more, you're going to get way better resources. You're going to get way more out of those resources. And ultimately, you're going to be a more successful organization.
Yeah, I think it's funny. It's like we're thinking of like the call to action out of these sections. There's always kind of there's an audit portion. There's like let's look inward. Let's assess how are we doing things today. You can't fix something if you're not clear on what it is and what's broken. So it's important that you do that. But I think one way that you could do this too is start looking at the one-on-one conversations you're having with your team members. Your own with your manager. Audit that process. What is the structure for this? What are we talking about? What are we focusing on? I mean, again, this is something where I caught myself early on. I realized it. There was some feedback, but it was more of a reflection on this, like getting the most out of these. Cause I am reading the status reports. Why am I doing this? Which I always hated, where we're spending all our time going through that. I would even say that, thank you for sending the status reports in. I've read it, or I will read it. Mm-hmm. Let's talk outside of this about the other stuff. And so it was a real change. And the other thing I would do, and this made a difference too, is that I tried to never hold those one-on-one meetings in my office. I tried to go down in the cafeteria, somewhere else in a conference room, like to break it up and just to make it more of a neutral place. And it was better if it was down. I started doing this. I held one-on-ones. The company had a bocce ball court, and I have my own bocce ball set. I'm a fan, and I would bring it to work, and we would meet over on campus at the bocce ball court and play a game, have a conversation for an hour. Didn't fit with everybody, but some people. But it was a great neutral place to have those conversations.
So you're saying if you just talk to people and kind of ask them what's going on and what they need and kind of how they want to grow.
That's part of it. And the other part of it is, so yes, have actual conversations, understand what's going on in the lives of your people. Why is Steve so like he just, it seems like he's distant like right now? It's like, hey, there might be something going on. Be aware of that kind of stuff. It's important. But the other part of it is, I think with all this too is, again, look at keep asking that question. Do people feel like they have room to experiment? Do they feel like they're never given the opportunity to use those learning credits and go take those courses that everybody has in their budget? But I've gotten to the end of a year where I felt like I was never able to use the credits I was given. And then I was remember my next one-on-one after that, because it came back as a negative that you didn't use all of your training credits. We really encourage you. And I'm like, who encourages it? It wasn't my manager that was encouraging that. Yeah. So it's giving people space is another important part of it. And what that means, what that looks like, I think you just need to have that conversation and figure out what that means.
Yeah. And I will say sometimes as a leader, you have to be aggressively helpful. And that might mean kind of forcing people to train in areas that they didn't feel comfortable otherwise. You need to push them a little bit. You need to, dangle a carrot over their head a little bit and be like, look, I really think you can do this. I believe in you, right? Sometimes it's creating the space, but it's also kind of pushing them into that space a little bit.
And I've had multiple managers that have done this that have no problem coming in on that Friday afternoon late and saying, go home, stop what you're doing. It'll be here Monday. Go home.
Yep. No, I agree. Same. And I think it definitely kind of makes you think differently about things.
Yep. Well, Sharon, enjoyed this conversation as always. Folks, for watching, we'll be back next Monday morning at 9 a.m. with another topic. So be sure to follow us. Please go out and subscribe to us on YouTube. So go to YouTube at Project Failure Files as one word. You'll find us. That's out there. If you search, you'll find us. And please let us know. Provide feedback. Give us a thumbs up. Tell us if you liked the episode. If this is your first episode, go in and comment, hey, first time seeing the show, really enjoyed this. We always appreciate that. It helps with the numbers. Since we moved over to our new YouTube page, Sharon, like not everybody's followed over from the last page. So we're still
we'll get 'em.
Struggling to grow that. But yeah, we'd love to hear more from you. And in the meantime, we'll go back to, let's see, it's not Friday. So it's still Monday, so you can't tell me to, and it's actually, this is in the morning. So I guess you could just say we just need to get back to work.
Yeah.
Or do the work stuff.
Probably ought to go back to work.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you later. See you next week.
Bye.